So now multiple times the Young Bucks have said that they started the sneakers and wrestling trend. This is absurd. Of course the Young Bucks did not start the sneakers and wrestling trend. However, if you read the stuff that the Young Bucks put out on the internet, and you just take it like you're reading their memoir, you just read it as 100% truth and get mad at it, then you've fallen for it. I mean, this is what the internet is used for. I tweet stuff out all the time. People take it literally, and I can't believe anybody's upset about it. But you know what? I guess that's how people read it. It's so weird with wrestling fans who grew up, all of us grew up understanding the difference between real life and entertainment, and understanding that we are being presented a product that is entertainment, not real life. But for some reason, when these entertainers that we understand are entertainers go on the internet, all of a sudden, it's real life. This is what new kayfabe is all about. Just not blinking, okay? I think that as fans, we're so used to wrestlers acknowledging when they're kayfabing and not kayfabing, that when you finally have people coming out and saying something that I guess they could technically believe and not winking, that you go, oh, they must not be kayfabing. Of course they're kayfabing. But regardless, we should still have this conversation, because some people do come to the defense. They go, the Young Bucks did start the sneaker trend. Who was doing that? And it goes much deeper than just the sneaker trend. It goes much deeper than who wrestled in sneakers first, right? Because people started digging through the internet and they found a picture of the Killer Bees wearing some black and yellow Nike Dunks in the late 80s. Does that mean Jumpin' Jim Brunzell gets credit? You better not tell the Iron Sheik. It's not about wearing sneakers in the ring. It's about bringing sneaker culture to wrestling. And the Young Bucks did do something original, okay? Because sneaker culture is bigger than just one thing. It's like wrestling. There's multiple different types of wrestling fans. And it's the same way in the sneaker world. The Young Bucks, they represent the type of sneaker fan that just wears whatever's cool. The Hypebeast. Let's be honest. I mean, the Young Bucks weren't at the forefront of sneaker trends. They were wearing mids, for God's sake, for years. They weren't the coolest things in the world. But then they started busting out the hype. They shocked the world when they came out with the Diors. They shocked the world when they came out with the Off-Whites. They shocked the world when they stuck thumbtacks on the bottom of those Travis Scott fragments. These are sneakers that make a difference in the sneaker world. And the Young Bucks brought them here. However, what the Young Bucks did was portrayed themselves as people who had come in to a tremendous amount of money and were using that money to co-opt this trend and wear just whatever was the most hyped thing. And guess what? It was perfect because they're heels. They gave you a reason. They said, how can we make people hate us? From the tip of our toe to the top of our head. And they go, well, we could grow out these big beards. People hate it when people grow out big beards. They said we could wear ridiculous hats. We could have clothes that are all like hyped up and match our sneakers that are crazy hyped. And so from the toe to the top of the head, it's heel. Heel, 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 heel. Even on their actual heel, they're coming across like a heel. They're using sneakers to highlight their character, which I think is a brilliant thing. Sneaker culture blew up to like an astronomical degree. It was already ridiculous, but it blew up even further over the pandemic after the Last Dance documentaries aired. After that 10-part Jordan documentary aired, Jordans went through the roof and all the other sneakers went with them, and they never came back down after it. The Young Bucks represent the post-Last Dance sneaker fan. And that is a huge part of sneaker culture. So I say that with peace and love. But sneakers have been around for a lot longer than that. The Jordan 1 has been around since like 1985, something like that. So we go back now and we look at who the big difference makers. First of all, you can go outside the industry, right? Because there are people that when we're going to have this conversation about sneakers and wrestling and the crossover, because it's happening, there are people that deserve some credit. For instance, Wale. Wale has worked very hard to incorporate sneaker culture into wrestling. Wale loves hip-hop. He's a hip-hop artist. Wale loves professional wrestling. He's been featured on professional wrestling before. Wale loves sneakers. He's designed sneakers. He designed a golden sneaker for the company ASICS that he called the IC Champion. It was available on WWE Shop. The New Day was wearing them. It was like he took a real sneaker brand, he incorporated wrestling culture into it, and he created something for sneaker culture. That's Wale for you. That's a beautiful thing, bringing these cultures together. You know who else brought these cultures together? One of the top sneaker customizers in the game, Mosh. M-A-C-H-E. Now he's coming out with his own sneakers. I got a couple pairs. But Mosh has been involved in the wrestling sneaker crossover forever. Mosh has done custom sneakers for Becky Lynch that she's worn to the ring, for Nikki Bella that she's worn to the ring. He's done WrestleMania sneakers for Shane O'Mac that he's worn to the ring. Countless. But when we look at superstars, other than, of course, Jumpin' Jim Brunzell, who brought this thing forward, I mean, there are a lot of people who get credit and a lot of people who don't get credit. Roman Reigns, for instance. We've talked about Roman Reigns before. Roman Reigns is also previously hasn't been known as a sneaker guy. This heel version of Roman Reigns is the Roman Reigns who is the sneaker guy. But again, that's a totally different thing. I feel like Roman, for a period of time, was wearing classic Jordans that drew this comparison of Roman Reigns being the closest equivalent to Michael Jordan that the WWE has ever seen. Whether you agree with it or not, the character of Roman Reigns that we know now would certainly believe that about himself. And I think that's what it was. But Roman is, and we saw him when he came out with the Travis Scott fragments that he was gifted by Jordan Brand. And I talked about that here on the podcast when it happened, because it was the closest thing to an NBA pregame show. When NBA players walk into the building, they walk in through the garage, and it's like a fashion show. They got the hottest shit on in the world. And that's the vibe that Roman Reigns had when he walked out in those Travis Scotts. That's the vibe that Roman Reigns has had when he walks out with his sneakers on a lot of the times. He comes across like a mainstream top-level athlete. I think that if there was ever an athlete to be sponsored by Jordan Brand in WWE, Roman Reigns would be that guy. And it's time. It's time, I think, that a WWE superstar get a deal with Jordan. And I think that Roman Reigns is the perfect guy to do that. But that Roman Reigns is like the Young Bucks represent the hype beast in sneaker culture. Roman Reigns represents the professional athlete in sneaker culture. I think when you talk about the GOATs of sneaker culture and wrestling, of course, you go to Shane McMahon. Shane McMahon deserves a lot of credit for popularizing sneakers in wrestling, not only recently, but always. You know, it's usually the Jordan 1 is the Shane McMahon shoe. And that is usually how people associate it with, no matter what every suit that he was wearing. When Shane McMahon shocked the world, Shane McMahon came back on Raw in some Chicago colorway Air Jordan 1s. The colorway that Jordan actually wore on the court when the Air Jordan 1 came out. Classic shoe, one of the most important sneakers of all time. And that was the impression that he made. He wore a suit and those Chicago Jordan 1s. And after that, just about every appearance he made, he had a different pair of Jordan 1s on. And some of them were like, oh, those aren't bad. And others were like, oh my God, you don't even know what you're wearing. But Shane wasn't wearing it as a gimmick. Shane didn't come across as wearing it as like, I'm going to use this to push this character along, or I'm going to cash in on sneaker fans and they're going to notice me. I don't even know if Shane McMahon knew how cool some of the shoes that he was wearing were. It was just clear to me that that's what Shane McMahon liked. And that's clear because if you look at Shane McMahon, and I mean, talk about not new to this, true to this, what people don't give Shane credit for is going back years before he left in the early 2000s. Shane McMahon was wrestling in Jordans. He would come to the ring in a suit and he'd wear his big boy shoes and everything. But I mean, like, when Shane McMahon and Vince McMahon fought Shawn Michaels and God, Shane McMahon was wearing Jordan 3s. Shane McMahon wrestled a match against God, and the footwear that he chose were the Jordan 3s. I think he wore Jordan 3s in that match with Kurt Angle, too. There's his singles match with Shawn Michaels. He was wearing the true blue Jordan 3s. Shane McMahon has been a Jordan guy forever. And if, matter of fact, if at any point I get the chance to interview Shane McMahon, that's what I'd like to ask him. How come, as a younger man, you seemed partial to the Jordan 3, but now the older man that we know seems very partial to the Jordan 1? Inquiring minds want to know, Shane McMahon. You know who needs huge credit for it, and somebody who absolutely, I think more than Shane McMahon, this person made it a big part of their character, but it was also really who they were. And also because this person, I think their character had a lot to do with who they really are. That was, of course, Enzo. My name is Enzo Amore. Enzo, not only would he come out in some hype stuff, Enzo never wore the same pair of sneakers twice in WWE. I think early in the NXT run, you could see him wearing the same sneakers in different matches. But once he got on the WWE roster, he never wore the same pair of sneakers twice. And he cared deeply about what sneakers he was wearing to every show. And he'd wear almost always Jordans, but every now and then you'd see him. I think he wore some Kyries at one point. I don't remember what else he wore. But Enzo was the type of sneaker guy who I would sit down and talk about sneakers with, and we'd be there all day. We could talk for hours. Like, it wasn't just, oh, yeah, I just saw these sneakers on the internet. It was, yeah, let's talk about this that's coming out, and that's coming out. Now it's supposed to come out, but that's not coming out till there. It's like Star Wars geeks talking about Star Wars. Like, we could sit there for hours and talk about shoes. So Enzo needs to 100% be on this list. When we talk about some of the women associated with Enzo, certainly Carmella. I mean, for a while, I think that was more the Staten Island Carmella character. But speaking of women who doesn't get a lot of credit for bringing sneakers out, Liv Morgan, heavy into sneakers in the beginning of this thing. I don't think I don't know if she wears them now anymore or not. I don't know if the new version, but like Riot Squad era Liv Morgan, NXT era Liv Morgan was heavy into that sneaker life. You know who else? Somebody who's not even in WWE or AEW that deserves a lot of credit for being in the sneaker game is Chris Bay from Impact. Chris Bay. So one of the biggest shoes that Nike put out in 2021 is the Chunky Dunky. And it is a Nike Dunk sneaker in collaboration with Ben & Jerry's ice cream. And the whole thing, it's like sky blue. It's got some cow print on it. It's got a yellow swoosh that kind of drips a little bit. The whole thing looks like a Ben & Jerry's container. But it was a limited edition. It's a beautiful sneaker. And people just went nuts for it. People loved that sneaker. I don't have them. I would love to have those. I don't have them. But Chris Bay, for one of the Impact pay-per-views, made gear. Like, I mean, tights, a jacket, the whole thing that totally matched the Chunky Dunkies. He made his entire, and as soon as I saw the gear, I didn't even watch him do an interview that explained it. As soon as I saw the gear, I was like, oh my God, this guy made wrestling gear based on the Chunky Dunks. This is the man right here. I'll tell you an OG in this thing that doesn't get nearly enough credit because he's quiet about it. This is probably the realest one when it comes to people that have brought sneakers forward in wrestling. That's Kofi. Kofi Kingston has been doing things for sneakers Kofi Kingston's been wrestling in sneakers forever. He just hit him with kick pads. But if you know what you're looking for, if you're a sneaker fan, you would see them peeking through the kick pads. I don't think it was really until he started wearing the Jeremy Scotts, which are those, I think they're Adidas sneakers that have the wings coming off of them. Remember for a long time, Kofi Kingston was wearing those sneakers that had wings coming off of them? Those were real sneakers. Those were not made for Kofi. Those weren't gear. Those were legit sneakers that were at the time sold in stores if you could find them. And Kofi was wrestling in them every week. This is a guy that's buying what appeals to his eye and his mind. But he's loved sneakers forever. He wore this was years ago. I think it was Steph Curry that came out with a dad shoe that everybody was kind of dunking on the internet. Everybody was making fun of it because it's like, why'd Steph Curry come out with a dad shoe? And Kofi wore him on Raw, and people were losing their minds for it because it's hilarious. And it's just like a tip of the hat to sneaker culture to be like, yeah, I'm with you guys. I see you guys. I'm bringing you guys to this stage. I mean, talk about wrestling and sneakers. I don't think you can go much further than the doctor of thugonomics. I mean, John Cena became so well known for his sneakers that he got a sneaker deal. John Cena's got his own line of sneakers that are available at Kmart. But it was the pump. It was the Reebok pump that really made John Cena. The Reebok pump complemented the throwback jerseys and the jean shorts so well. Made him the doctor of thugonomics. People forget the 5 moves of doom, the 5-knuckle shuffle used to have a pump that would go with it. John Cena would pump up the tags of his shoes. Before he would drop that 5-knuckle shuffle, he had to stop doing it, of course, because he didn't have pumps anymore, and he looked like a damn fool trying to pump up a pair of non-pumps. But John Cena roll into the ring in those Reebok pumps, that was a big move. I mean, would the doctor of thugonomics have gotten so over had he not been wearing Reebok pumps? I don't know. I can't tell you for sure that he would. But when you really break it down, I really put some thought into this. When you really break it down and you try to figure out who was the superstar that brought sneaker culture into wrestling, the answer to me is so clear. The first person that started this trend, it's so clear. And it's really interesting because it actually predates sneaker culture. It doesn't predate the sneaker per se, but it certainly predates people waiting online to buy these things. It predates the Jordan 1. The person who brought sneaker culture into wrestling is the person who brought the spirit of sneaker culture into wrestling. And the spirit of sneaker culture is you're bragging about what's on your feet. The spirit of sneaker culture is that you are showing the world what you're capable of by what you're wearing on your feet. So much of sneaker culture is the simple statement: my shoes cost more than your house. Duh. All sneaker culture is nature boying. Woo! Nachin' up and down the block. Sneaker culture is Ric Flair. Ric Flair not only brought sneaker culture into wrestling, I would argue Ric Flair created sneaker culture. So it's not a question of what wrestler brought sneakers to wrestling first. It's what wrestler brought sneaker culture to sneakers. And it's the guy that lived in the biggest house on the tallest hill in the biggest section of town. The wheeling, dealing, woo, kiss stealing, limousine riding, jet plane flying, son of a gun, longest line, oldest ride, space mountain nature boy, Ric Flair. Every bit of sneaker culture is Ric Flair taking off those alligator shoes and letting the world know exactly how much they cost. You don't think the world had been what the world is in 2021, when the nature boy was lighting things on fire for Crockett, you don't think Ric Flair would be pulling a pair of off-whites off his feet? You don't think Ric Flair would be rolling into the Omni wearing some fragments? You don't think that Ric Flair, let me tell you something, Ric Flair would be walking into Starrcade with some Red Octobers. Just because he didn't have the opportunity to do it doesn't mean he doesn't get credit for it. If you ask me, it's really, really clear. Shane McMahon, Kofi Kingston, John Cena, all these guys brought sneakers into wrestling, yeah. But who introduced sneaker culture into professional wrestling? That's obvious. It's the person who taught sneaker culture how to sneaker culture. It's the nature boy Ric Flair. Anybody that has stood in line. You know why people stand in line outside a Foot Locker to try to get a pair of sneakers? Because you don't have them. That's why they're standing in line. Why are people standing in line to get a pair of Jordan 4s that look exactly like another pair that you have? Because they're a little bit different than the pair that you have. You don't have these, and I do. Why do people wear a pair of shoes that are more expensive than your mortgage payment? Why? Because I thought I told you my shoes cost more than your house. You need to understand that there are levels to this. And there's Nature Boy, and there's everyone else. Sneaker culture is all one Ric Flair promo. And to this day, they're learning from the master. To be the man, woo, you got to beat the man. I truly believe that all of it, even what the Young Bucks are doing, when they show up to Double or Nothing with the most, when the Young Bucks show up on AEW TV with a pair of Dior Jordan 1s that are way too expensive for anybody at home to buy. That's why they're wearing them. So that we want to boo them even more, because the amount of money that's on their feet is more than what's in our paycheck. And what is the difference between that and showing up on the Superstation with a pair of alligator shoes? You know what the answer is? Absolutely nothing.